Welcome to Faculty Friday. It's a relatively new initiative. Thank you for coming. Glad to have you. It is something that we record. So if you prefer not to have your face on a screen, you are welcome to not have your face on a screen. If you don't mind, go ahead and do so. Some folks are having lunch like myself, and I have apparently, well, just no regard for others. No, I'll try to keep it to a minimum. At any rate, we do these in three phases. The first is to invite the faculty from a particular department, in this case history, to come on and to talk about the history program here at A&M Texarkana, but also a sense of how they ended up in doing history. I found out last week from the assembled faculty that we had Cantrell, myself, and Hinton. Not a one of us started out as an English major. The bonus points for those of you who remember, but those who weren't here, any guesses as to what Corinne Hinton started out as? Meteorologist would be your correct answer. Meteorologist, though she insists that she was not going to become a weather person, although it is National Weather Person's Day. My Google Calendar let me know that today. So the second phase then, after spending 10-15 minutes talking about the program, how they ended up in history, sort of that type of thing, is a Q&A that looks a lot like Who's Up Wednesday, and it is me asking questions of them, and the collected faculty can answer, then, and as well as students, and is much more participatory in that regard. And then the last thing that we'll do is Craig is going to talk about what it is that he does for research, and why and what he's interested in, not in a presentation. Craig's now remembering that he's agreed to do this. That's the moment of recognition that happened on his face when I started to say Craig is going to. And Craig's like, I have no idea what is about ready to come out of Julian's mouth. What have I agreed to? The moment of satisfaction, thankfully, is on recording, and I encourage you all to go back to that moment when he realizes, oh yes, I remember. I am going to talk about research, not in I'm presenting a paper sort of way, but rather in the sense of what it is that he's interested in and why and how and so on. Okay, so the opening of this again is the history major at A&M Texarkana. So in a general sense, the assembled gentlemen, we have Dr. Nakashian, Dr. Waggy, and Dr. Perry. What does the history major at A&M Texarkana look like? What do people typically do with it? Again, the recorded piece that maybe people can come back if they're sort of interested in history, they can pop on and go, okay, after we get through Doug's weird preamble, somebody's going to talk about what history at A&M Texarkana looks like. So what does history at A&M Texarkana look like?
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction, I guess, and the reminder that apparently I'm talking about warrior clerics later. I'd forgotten that. Do either of you gents want to talk from more experience than I have, Tom or Michael, or do you want me to give the overview?
Yeah, you go for it. I mean, about the history program, you're the most well versed.
You are the history program. Do it.
Oh, that I don't think that's a good thing. Okay, yeah, sure, fine. The history program here at A&M Texarkana is really designed, to try to do a couple of things. One is to give students a broad, sweep of historical knowledge and training. So you will take courses that we sort of categorize as American history, US history, European history, and world history. And most of our world history is Asia and Latin America right now. And thankfully, Dr. Waggy and Dr. Perry can cover those areas, and that's great. So you will have some choice within that. We designate courses as one of those three categories, and you're expected to take a few in each of those. You've also got some open electives in history. So if you want to specialize in something like, I don't know, medieval Europe, for instance, you can take more courses in that. And then we have a couple of required courses, primarily Perry's American Social and Intellectual History course, which is kind of our, I don't know, it's both kind of a foundation and an end point. It's a great class. And we also do Texas history as well. That's mostly for folks who are interested in teaching. So we're a small program in that we've got 3 full-time faculty and then an army of adjunct faculty, some who are sort of starting out their careers, some who have run through their careers and are kindly donating their time to us again, like Tom Couture, for instance. And it's good. So we try to we try to bring as much coverage to history as possible. And like anything, it's based on getting students engaged with historical topics, historical questions, and historical materials. Get you in front of primary sources as much as possible, get you analyzing them, get you writing about them, and really addressing those big questions in history. I can see Brooklyn bemusingly looking at me, since yesterday in my medieval civ course, I inflicted a historiographical article deconstructing arguments over the use of the term feudalism. And it was brutal. It's just, but I like to sometimes pull back the tarp of the simplification of history that we have to do in class and show you the teeming underbelly of arguments about what history actually is. So anyway, that's how the program works, more or less. Right. I think that's at least the undergraduate level, and then the graduate level is a little bit different. That's kind of more open in terms of requirements. So you kind of take what we're offering, more or less.
What do students typically do upon graduation?
I'd say about half of our majors are usually pursuing certification in teaching. That's a pretty straightforward outcome for history. So when you look at the major, about half of them are doing middle or high school certification. So a lot of them will become high school history teachers or social studies teachers or something like that. So that's a pretty natural outcome. The other half are a lot more eclectic. They sort of go off in all the different directions that liberal arts students can go off in. So we've had students go into government. We've had some who've worked for like local government. One I'm thinking of would be the fellow who used to run our farmers market in town and then became a city planner and then moved off to Seattle to get promoted or something. We've had some who've ended up in more heritage tourism. So, folks will end up at historic sites, places like Old Washington, or similar museums in some cases, certainly archives, and others who've ended up shockingly in the private sector making money. So we've had, I know it's crazy. Like anything, like other liberal arts kind of degrees, you can transfer what you are getting skilled at into managerial or marketing or other sorts of areas there. So for students who are more interested in that, I've tended to try to steer them to a minor that also will balance that out, like in some business classes or whatnot. But so yeah, I think you can kind of go anywhere and everywhere except places that require specific training and licensure. So if you want to be a nurse or like a structural engineer or something, yeah, maybe don't study history. Bad plan. Or maybe do, I don't know. Yeah, who cares? Get another degree. We'll Ben Newman it for a while, whatever. Do whichever you want.
Bring Michael and Tom into the fold. How did you end up doing history? How did you end up in this moment and said, okay, history is what it is. That's what I'm going to study. Did you start out doing history and find it later, or how does your path to becoming a doctor of history, a scholar of history, come about?
I'll talk because Michael's eating lunch. I think most people enjoy history as children. I think it's something that everybody shares, just an interest in olden times and old people. Now, I took a little further than others, but I mean, I remember in, I don't know, 4th, 5th grade, in the back of the room, a shelf of narrow green books of biographies of famous people, and I read them all and read them again. I mean, just that kind of thing as a child. Then I became I've always wanted to be a teacher. So my major in undergraduate school was secondary ed social studies. And I taught junior high school for 6 years. But I was seeking for a way to understand why people act as they do. And I had started out with psychology and decided that wasn't for me. And then I was going to go to school in political science and decided that wasn't for me. And I decided to read history. And graduate school is an opportunity to read history. And that's what I did. read and write. History is about reading and writing, and what you're searching for is understanding. And I'm still searching and still writing and doing an enormous amount of reading. And I'm, for example, I am rewriting my US 20th century in the fall, trying to understand what's gone on in the last half century in America. And I'm rewriting it and redoing it in new textbook and so on. So it's fun. You know, we're allowed to have fun. And I can't, people who get up in the morning and just hate to go to their job, they should be historians. You know what I mean? You can't, I love coming to the office every day, and they keep trying to push me out the window here, but I ain't getting me out yet. And I can't imagine not enjoying history. And you can do it. You don't have to be a PhD to enjoy history. Almost everybody enjoys history in a video format. Many people still read books. It's a part of almost everybody's life. But if you want to try to reach understanding, you probably need to commit yourself to some study. And that's what you do in history. You study, you talk, you read, you write, and then you do it again. It looks like Michael has finished his lunch, so I'll turn it over to him.
Well, I was also interested in history as a child. Was the discipline I seemingly excelled at most in middle school and high school. When I got to college, I feel almost sad for students who have to rush these days to figure out what their major is, because I started out as political science in this kind of weird faction of history called the history of public policy, based on just a professor that I was all excited about, and he sold it to me, but then I decided I didn't want to do that. I had foreign exchange students stay with my family when I was in high school, so I got fascinated with the whole abroad thing. So I was taking German, spent a year abroad at the university, George Augustus University in Göttingen, Germany, and that transformed my life in many different ways. And came back from that experience and decided just to go straight history and German. So I had a double major. And I was mostly studying European history at the time. I'm an old man, so this was back in the 80s. And I was galvanized by my shock at what the Reagan administration was doing in Central America at the time. A place that's again in the news. Honduras in particular, because we're getting many immigrants from there. But in the 80s, they were our closest allies in a war against Nicaragua. And we couldn't say enough good things about the people of Honduras then. I didn't particularly agree with the politics, so I try to figure out, I try to understand what was happening down there, starting with reading the history of the place. And I went and got a master's degree at University of California, Santa Barbara in Latin American and Iberian studies. So interdisciplinary major. Again, I try to figure out what was happening by studying the past. I ended up not being able to finish a paper very timely on Venezuelan history, and just delved more. And I was thinking I'm going to get to the bottom of the barrel and understand history of Venezuela. Yeah, well, that never happened, but I got lost in it enough to then pursue it in a PhD program at Emory University. And it's always kind of funny how I ended up studying early colonial Venezuelan history, I'm not even sure I understand that. Strangely enough. But I got, if you delve into anything deep enough, you get into it. And one of the things that study of history does in general is, people ask me, what do you learn from history? And it's hard to come up with one thing. But if I had to come up with one thing, it'd be you learn about human nature, right? Because you're studying humans and past human life. And so you see some patterns and you learn about human nature in many ways, which is not always fitting into the idealistic type of history you learn in, K through 12 school, by the way. And of course, it's something you don't ever entirely understand. So I suspect, like Tom Waggy, I will be studying this forever and will die with a very deep sense of a lack of understanding. But hey, I'm striving to get closer. And in grad school, you have to love the research and writing. And I do love that still to some extent. And I also love the teaching. I love, in history, Greg mentioned History 419. I love, looking at documents with students, that, exposing them to some important documents and some important ideas, and hearing what they have to say about it, exploring it. And also trying to figure out what the author of those documents was trying to convey, and come to some understanding of the significance of those documents in American history. So like Tom Waggy, I do love coming to work. And I'll leave it at that.
So we like to hear in the management class. Amen. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's interesting how similar, I guess it is. Much like Tom and Michael, when I first started at university, I was doing political science and history as well. So it's kind of a lot of synergy there. In retrospect, I probably should have done literature and history. It made a lot more sense for my future work. But yeah, I don't know why I became a medieval historian. Strictly speaking, as a kid, I was mostly interested in American history. I think that's kind of hard to avoid when you're kind of being, if you're interested in history, you're going to be getting a lot of American stuff. So I did a lot of Civil War. I was really interested in Civil War. And I remember meeting my stepdad, who taught adjunct at this local college, set up a meeting with one of the history guys for me to go and talk. I think I was a junior or something. And I went into his office, and he had a very small, cramped little office, like all good arts and science faculty. I had to walk by the palace that the College of Business had, but anyway. And I went into his little asbestos space, and it was sort of just festooned with like maps and shields and shit. And I was like, okay, he had a big bushy beard, and he did medieval Anglo-Saxon history. So we were talking about stuff that I knew nothing about. And I think that's actually what got me into it. I was like, I don't know anything you're talking about. This is such an alien, different world. And so when I started taking classes at the university in medieval history specifically, yeah, it's sort of to what Perry was talking about, that you're getting this deep sense of an alien kind of landscape, but they're also folks, they're people. They're trying to, navigate the same questions. They're navigating a lot of the same issues that all humans have in every society. And it was, it was just really fascinating. I mean, the ignorance I brought to it is what captivated me, because I just knew so little about it. And the only time I've ever thought, I think I told Brooklyn this yesterday, the only time I've ever thought I knew anything about medieval history was probably after I got my undergraduate degree. So I graduated and I was like, I know things. And then I went to England, to the University of Durham, and did my master's degree. And I was like, what am I doing? These are actually smart people who do smart things. And then my advisor, who's a knight now, by the way, asked me, so what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't even know the words you people have used. What the hell am I doing here? And yeah, so that ignorance is what drives you. But yeah, what you learn as a historian is you learn a lot about something very specific, and you mostly learn how much you don't know. And it's just, yeah, as we said in class yesterday, history is everything that ever happened to everything else ever. So, besides that, it's not much. So, yeah, it's fun. You'll be fine. You be quiet, majors. But no, see, like Socrates said, those of you who know the grand scope of how much you don't know are in a better place than the people who think they know, who have just absolute clarity that, this is exactly how it was. And it's like, no, it wasn't. It wasn't like that at all. Stop. But anyway, yeah, so that was my little story.
Excellent. I think we're winning, as ultimately I had that same feeling walking out of my undergraduate degree that I knew, but I think the undergraduates underneath in history and on the literature composition, media communication walk out going, I don't know nearly as much as I ought to. So we're winning that battle. Move into the second segment, and this time anyone, including the folks gathered, can answer this question. And sort of have a series of them until we run out of them. I don't know, Tyler, do you have the question ball no, okay, good. I can avoid the question ball yet again. That's one of the games I try to play. These are just meant to be conversations. One of the things I think we're lacking in the pandemic world is the opportunity to sort of meet folk, talk to folk, and answer questions and think about things together. Some of these are more silly than others, but I thought of this one because I'm very curious what Tom Waggy will say. So Tom, when I was writing down the set of questions, this one is particularly for you that you can say I'm not answering. The question is this: what moment of glory have you watched another person celebrate that you too would love to experience? A moment of glory that you watched someone else celebrate that you went, I wish I were the one doing that and could experience it.
You spent an enormous amount of time sandbagging me with a question like that. Is that where we're at? Do I get to ask you questions then?
Yes, you certainly
but
can.
I'm going to have a couple of weeks to prepare a goodie like this one. Something I've observed in history.
Or just in sport is where I was thinking, because I think in sport is the spot where I think I've seen people experience a great joy.
Well, give me an example. What have you
This is
seen?
not going to be a baseball conversation again, is it?
It very well could be soccer, Michael Perry. I'm just saying, I think one of the things that watching, for example, the 1980 hockey team, and the idea of being up against something that was unbeatable, and the miracle on ice truly miraculous, and the coming together and having that, watching that celebration, which was one built upon the foundation of teamwork and hard work and effort, but also having done something no one expected them to do. That kind of celebration, that kind of joy and glory is something that I think I would like to experience. But my answer is more simple, Tom. The glory that I would like to have, the thing that I would like to do above all else, even disc jockey, would be to be a Major League Baseball catcher. I would love the glory of starting opening day, squatting behind the plate, and taking the first pitch in a Major League Baseball season. That to me would be divine.
Well, that's very interesting, and I don't disagree with you. I think that would be fun. It's not me, because I'm a coward and it would never work for me. But I often think about my uncle in the 82nd Airborne. June 5 and 6.
Mm.
I mean, what a moment that young man was a part of. I did oral history with him extensively, and I grew up listening to all of his stories. I mean, what a moment to be a part of. I'm afraid I'd have run to the other side of England rather than get on that plane. But can you imagine going through that door into the total darkness, having and being a part of it, and having that tie and that commitment to when his feet were frostbitten and they were going to amputate them, and he wouldn't let them. And they were going to send him home, and he wouldn't let them. He went back. He went back to his unit in the middle of that god-awful winter. I mean, what a moment to study men and women in those kinds of situations where you could not do what they did, but if you could, what would that mean to you that you could do that? I couldn't, but man.
Someone has to follow that, unfortunately.
I'm not going to use my example now because it would be mean and tawdry and foolish. So I'm just going to say, yeah, that's a good one. I like that one, Tom. Well done. Yeah, Perry just gives the thumbs up. Yeah, that's good. I will help Tom though. Yeah, I would say that I think that is a deeply meaningful glory moment. Very, very different, obviously, than what Doug was talking about of being a major league catcher, I suppose. But no, I think that's something that the study of history kind of makes us, I guess, consider, right? Those sorts of things. These folks who were doing things that seem extraordinary, and yeah, they were folks. I mean, I think they were extraordinary, but at the same time, I don't know. I'd like to think that if we were in those circumstances, I mean, I'm with Tom. I would have stayed on the boat back in New York Harbor and hidden in the bottom of it. But I don't know. What about you, Perry? What's your moment?
Oh, I don't want to go to my moment, but the comment on Tom's moment, which no one could really follow. Mine would look silly and insignificant in comparison as well. But
now I really want to know what it is, Michael.
What a historian often might say to that is, yeah, well, what about that guy's moment? But we'd also be cognizant of the other side that's going to probably die and lose, right? And some of the most dramatic and maybe humanly meaningful things in life also have a tragic side to them. And studying history kind of gives you a frustratingly complex picture of it. And so you are asking, what part of your of glory in the past would you like to relive? Well, as a historian now, I just can't see the glory, right? I see the glory, and I see all the complications that come with that glory, and also there's probably something on the other side that's inglorious. And I only illustrate that because if you study the past carefully, you learn that the complexity of not only of past life, but life today, and it gives you perspective. It doesn't mean you don't take a side, but it gives you perspective.
Y'all, no one in the prior series of questions ever historicized their answer. It was all very just fun. You can't take the historians out of the history, apparently. Well, so let me try it this way. It's also just simply to get to know y'all. And I'm curious, Michael, at some point, share with me what your moment would have been so that I can feel better about myself. I went out on a limb with, my foolish ideas of what would be great, linked to sports, only to be crushed by Tom Waggy. An experience many of us have felt when you offer your idea and then Tom suggests what the real thing is. But it's unintentional and done with the greatest sense of kindness, always out of Tom. So let me ask this. What is the most exquisite restaurant at which you've ever eaten? the most exquisite restaurant you've ever eaten? And anyone can answer these. It doesn't have to be Craig and Michael and Tom. If you, Tyler.
Well, I do have an answer for that. I didn't have an answer for I'm so glad I didn't get Tom's question because I'm just drawing a blank.
Oh, anybody gets these questions. Everybody gets the question.
But my Thai in Atlanta, Georgia, a Thai restaurant that my wife and I and my fellow graduate student colleagues all went to and just thought was the best place ever.
What did you have? Do you remember?
Yeah, yellow curry. They had the best yellow curry in the world.
Yeah, this is a topic of which I know more. So I will unlock my word. Not more than you, Perry. I mean, more than what I knew on the last one. I was going to make a comment about Rob Gronkowski, so I'm glad I didn't. But anyway, I think shotgunning a beer in a parade after a Super Bowl win is probably the moment I'd want. But anyway, after the 82nd Airborne, I don't know if I can really top that. But yeah, I'd say like I don't know about most exquisite, but definitely most memorable. I have a bunch. But the one that leaps to mind was more of kind of an experience. I was in London about 15, 16 years ago. And when my wife's friend's husband worked for the Bank of Scotland, Royal Bank of Scotland. This is before the financial crisis. So they were just like burning money. They just had money everywhere. And he took me out to lunch for reasons passing understanding. I think we wrote it off because I had roomed with a guy in college who did some kind of corporate leasing, and I gave him his card, and then we could write it off as a business lunch. And he took me to a sushi place in the financial district of London where, yeah, it was the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu or anything like that. But we just ordered probably our weight in sushi and shark fin soup and all the other stuff. And when the bill came, of course, there was no question that I was going to pay it or that I could, frankly. But it was well into the hundreds of pounds, just the two of us. So, drinking sake and stuff. So from what I remember, that was a really good and exquisite moment. I don't remember the later parts of it as well, but the early parts were spectacular because it was fantastic and I didn't have to pay for it. So that was my favorite. Yeah, that was probably the best experience. Although the Brazilian steakhouse in San Diego was pretty badass. I don't know.
Students, have you eaten any place you would refer to as exquisite or memorable in that way?
Joe's Crab Shack. The Mighty Crab.
Mighty Crab.
The Mighty Crab?
Yeah.
Where is the Mighty Crab in Houston?
No, well, there's one in Houston, but they actually opened one here in Texarkana, like right behind Target.
I did not know that we have a Mighty Crab.
It's new. So
What do you get?
for
What
all
do you
you
get at
guys,
the Mighty? I assume you get crab, but what do you get at the Mighty? Is it like a Joe's Crab Shack?
it's similar to Joe's Crab Shack, but I would say it's better than Joe's Crab Shack.
Brooklyn's
I
going to
guess
deny
the-
that. I saw the look. Even with the mask
It's-
on, Brooklyn, it became very clear. She's like, I don't think
No,
so.
it is. So it is. The seasoning in it is so good. I get half a pound of snow crab legs and then shrimp with no head, and I get I get the Cajun, Almighty Crab special, and an extra hot.
Yeah, I did not know something moved into the old Hopkins location behind Target. The
Yes.
Mighty Crab.
Y'all should definitely try it out.
Do they have takeout?
Yes, they also have takeout.
Any other exquisite dining experiences?
I got another one. There used to be a place up. I'll just keep talking about restaurants. Now you've got something that I know about. Glory, that is not for me, but a full stomach, that's a dream that I can make come true. So yeah, there was a place up in I can't even believe I'm saying it, but it was in Connecticut, of all places, my least favorite state in the union. I know there's no one from Connecticut here, so I can say that. But there's not. I would recognize you by the horns, for instance. But anyhow, no, it's a fine state. But they had a restaurant that was a 17th century restaurant, and it was like an inn, and New Englandy, oldie worldy stuff. But they used to cook sort of traditionally. So they would cook in front of the open hearth with the spits and the various pans and whatnot. I remember getting basically like broiled baked scallops there, and they were divine. So Can't remember what it's called now. It's probably closed, but yeah, that was a long time ago too. That was like 15 years ago. So yeah, I've got loads more, but I'll be quiet.
Yeah, and I could do too. I'm trying to think of what mine would be. I keep thinking of this. I got to go to Leningrad, and after touring the Hermitage, we ended up in this restaurant that was wickedly expensive. And I remember eating borscht and finding it delightful. And any place that could make borscht seem like it was rich and wonderful. And I thought this is a trick done well. Let's move one. I think we have time for at least one more question. This will get back, and you can put your historian caps back on. So Craig is out. No, but no, I think you can answer this one as well. As part of an assignment on human behavior, you've been asked to do a couple hours of plain and simple people watching. Assignment on human behavior, assigned to do people watching. You're going to spend a couple hours doing it. Where in the world would you go? Where, if you could go anywhere, you don't have to fill out any grant proposals. You just simply get to go somewhere in the world and people watch for 2 hours.
I've done that before. And there's a lot of different places to do that. And I think of in Europe and in Mexico. 2 places in Mexico that come to mind though, right off the bat. There is this hill in Mexico called Tepeyac, which was once the hill of the ancient goddess of fertility, Tonantzin. And in 1531, this is where Juan Diego saw, so the story goes, the apparition of the Virgin of Guadalupe. And I won't go into that story, but after that, they built a 16th century basilica. Now I have a 20th century basilica next to it. And it's a place of pilgrimage for Mexicans, Mexican Catholics to this day. It always has been since 53, but still to this day, maybe even pre-Columbian, and it's throngs of people, just throngs of people every day. I wouldn't dare to go there on the day of Virgin Guadalupe, December 12th, because I'd just be squashed. But it is really fascinating place to people watch. The other place would probably be another pretty steep hill in Mexico City area of Chapultepec. And that's interesting because it's like the Mexican Alamo, although actually more important. I know I just offended a lot of people, a lot of Texans, but it was a place of residence in the Aztecs it's a place of fresh water for Tenochtitlan. It was a place of the viceroys in colonial era. It was a place of the president's palace for a while. It was also during the U.S.-Mexican War, the place of their last stand where everybody died, and all the cadets. It was a military academy. All the cadets, they chose death over surrendering to the Americans. They're called the hero children to this day. But you see busloads of kids, school kids getting off to visit this historical shrine of Mexico, along with tourists and other people. And that's another fascinating place to people watch. That's mine.
Okay. Yeah, much like Tom with the 82nd Airborne, I don't really want to follow that one either, Perry. Thanks a lot. What do you got, Tom? Where would you watch people?
I'm thinking about, I am a confirmed people watcher. When I travel, I do a lot of setting and watching and thinking about what I am seeing in terms of people's lives. And there have been a lot of those where I go to Budapest and just set out in one of the squares there, and it's interesting. But the 2 that came to mind while you all were talking that I would like to go back to, one of them is the Holocaust Museum in Hiroshima. I don't want to go to the museum again, thank you very much. I walked out when I got to the melted baby buggy. But I then went and sat in the Children's Memorial across the street just because that was as far as I could walk. I was shaken. And the kids, then they come by the bus loads and they unload there. And at that time, seeing the American sitting there in his Levi's and t-shirt and all was something of interest to them. And so they came, all of these wonderful children, and they wanted to speak English. And so they know, hi, how are you? And I know, hi, how are you? And that's the extent of our conversation. It was a wonderful opportunity to understand the beauty of these children after I just walked out of that museum where thousands and thousands had died. So that had an influence. I'd like to go back to that and see and talk to those children again, although our conversation was not much. I've got others, but one that came to mind was whenever I travel, I get up very early and get out on the streets. And in Luang Prabang, Laos, I would set that's the old imperial city, and the residence of the king there is not really a castle because they were very poor backward country, but it was a beautiful building. And I would sit across the street, and at daylight, the monks from the temples there would walk by. Now it's basically ceremonial, although traditionally, I'm still people kneel down as they come by, and they fill their rice bowls. And they're lined up, the monks are lined up from the oldest to the youngest. And so you see this transition of these people from the very serious, stern-looking elderly to the little boys prancing along behind, or so tired they can hardly walk because they have to get up so early. And it was as the local people kneeled on the street and filled their rice bowls, it strikes you with the power of tradition. The power of tradition that this is a legacy, or they don't. I'm not sure how much spiritual meaning it has. Apparently, a lot, but also it has just a tie to their life and ancestors and all that they were allowing me to share as they walked by that building. So I'd like to go back and do that again too. There you go. There you go.
Thank you. We have run against time, which means that we've spent into our third segment. And Craig, I know you have to get off to Faculty Senate. We can't really start without you, I don't think. So you can filibuster if you like. I would much rather hear from you on radical clerics than whatever Faculty Senate is taking up today. But I'll be at both. So however long you want to take to talk about what it is that you do as far as research and on all of that, please.
I won't take very long. 30, 45 minutes at a minimum, at a max. We won't go beyond that. No, just a little bit. Yeah, I guess my work, such as it is usually I'm interested in the lesser known aspects of popular topics for whatever reason. So when I first started doing sort of professional-ish history when I was a grad student and writing articles and whatnot, I was interested in broadly, I'm interested in war, I'm interested in religion, I'm interested in culture. And so I wrote an article on war in medieval England and France, but I was interested in the soldiers that, most people didn't really care about. These would be like the peasant levies, for instance. I wasn't really interested in knights. I wasn't interested in any of that. I was like, who the hell are these other guys who were just dragged out of like Arkenfeld or something with a pointed stick and been like, go that way. So I wrote a deeply mediocre article about that. And then as I was doing my PhD, I thought, I'm going to get into I'm going to look at more of this. I'm going to look at these guys coming from cities, urban militias and stuff. And I put that aside because I realized that as I was reading more about it, I was getting more and more interested in these clerics, mostly bishops who had, power in these cities, and how they were interacting with war and stuff. Because when you think of medieval warfare, you don't normally think of clerics. Usually, I don't think anyway. You don't think of bishops and priests and stuff. You think of knights and dukes and what have you. So yeah, I was interested in how does religion intersect with warfare in a very real sense. We have this image of medieval Christianity, for instance, or of Christianity in general, as being pacifistic, which it's not, and which it wasn't, but which it aspired to be in a lot of ways. And there were a lot of folks in the Middle Ages who were like, yeah, obviously clerics shouldn't be killing folk. And I was like, yeah, but you're also cheering them on when they're doing it for reasons you agree with. So that seems a little disingenuous to me. So I was interested in that. And yeah, in actual fact, yeah, Chandler's point in the chat about D&D. It's not lost on me that the characters I normally played in D&D from being a child onwards were clerics. So I'm thinking that maybe, yeah, horrifyingly enough, my research interests were actually shaped by the fact that the party needed a cleric back in 1991, and I was the one who did it. But yeah, so that's sort of the intersection of those two really huge elements of human experience, warfare and religion, in the medieval context. Where are those confluences, and where are those maybe areas of tension? Because we like to believe maybe that we're actors of ideology, and that's probably true to an extent, but we're also really actors of partisanship, in that if I like the outcome of something, I'm going to usually twist myself to justify why it's okay that we got to that outcome. And they were doing the same thing. And so, yeah, anyway, if you want to read my book about it, you can. I think Matt Smith has read the book. He has muscled through it. Well done. I could have done much better in places, as he'll tell you. But now I'm in theory pivoting back to the urban militias. I'm editing a book on warfare in cities in the Middle Ages with a colleague of mine, which I think is due this summer. So yeah, I'm on the hook to write the introduction and an article, which is probably going to bear significant resemblances to to a conference for a paper I wrote in grad school on English urban militias. So we'll see. But hopefully that'll shut that chapter, and I can then move on to something else. I don't know what yet. I haven't figured out what else is interesting yet, but something will come up. I'm getting more and more interested in medievalism as well. I think that's kind of a natural outcome. I teach a course on how Hollywood has sort of reimagined the Middle Ages, and that's always a really interesting notion. Where do we in America or in Britain generally, it's a kind of a shared cinematic culture. How do we imagine the Middle Ages going? When it will be offered again? Probably next spring, maybe next fall. I don't know. That's an excellent question. I gotta be like, when the hell am I teaching that class again? I was supposed to do it this spring, but because I'm faculty senate president, I had to take that course off. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully soon, because it's a really fun class and it's really interesting. I'll try. And that's an area that I'm more interested in maybe recently. So like later in this semester, I'm giving a talk I'm leading a discussion, hopefully, on Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court. And the 19th century kind of reimaginings of the Middle Ages are just wild. You get from Walter Scott and the kind of romantic sort of reimagining up through the deeply cynical people like Twain, who I believe actually blamed Walter Scott's Ivanhoe for the American Civil War, which I think is just great. Giving the South this notion of chivalry and all this other crap. But anyhow, so yeah, we've got those areas I think are really interesting to me, these 19th and 20th century kind of reimaginings. But I'm not an expert on 19th or 20th century history, so it would be a little bit outside my bailiwick to do too much serious with that. But I'll stop there because yeah, if you have any last points or questions, and then we can trundle off to faculty senate together. Actually, 3 of us I think are going to faculty senate at least. Me, you, and Michael. So, or anyone else, you're all welcome. Open meetings.
Yeah, it is an open meeting, and thrilling as I suggested. No, I do not have any questions. Any of the assembled folk have a question for Craig, Michael, or Tom? You certainly can ask.
I don't have a question, but going back to the question you asked Waggy, I do have a fun story if you guys want to spend the next couple of minutes listening
yes,
to
I
the
do.
Gallego story. Okay, so back when my mom was in high school, Janet Jackson was recruiting for her music video of Miss You Much. And my mom, who had spent her entire childhood dancing, auditioned thinking, oh, I'm just going to audition. It's going to be whatever. Apparently, she was so ridiculously good a dancer that she made it to the final phase of auditions. And it was down between her and this other guy who she actually got to meet. And he was like really cool. And she told me that if she had been just a couple seconds, and I mean like a couple seconds faster, she would have gotten the part. And so like to this day, like we'll watch the music video and she's like, oh, you see him right there? She's like, that could have been my part. That could have been me. And it's so cool because like she doesn't say it in a way like she's like really sad about it. Like to this day, like she's still really excited that she made it that far, considering like how young she was and like how much she loves Janet Jackson. And so when I think about it, I'm like, wow, I'd give anything to go back to like 1989 and see my mom auditioning for Janet Jackson. Like I'd give anything to see that. So I just thought about it and I was like, wow, that's to me, like that's still my favorite story to tell. So I'm like, how like I can just brag all day that my mom almost got to meet Janet Jackson.
I agree. I agree. I think a great way to finish the sense of tell your friends these faculty Fridays are fun. You find out interesting things. I never knew that about Sam and her mother. I'm thrilled to know it. I never considered how lame and weak and awful my understanding of glory was until Tom Waggy put me in my place this afternoon. Not at all, not at all. Looking at different senses of glory. I'm a good Derridian deconstructionist. I understand that words mean lots of things, and Tom took it to mean something entirely different. The same kind of thing happens in a mix and mingle on a Monday, where you get a chance to talk to folks individually, and on Who's Up Wednesday, where I ask these questions. And it's entertaining. You get to learn some things, and you also get to understand some things about people that you did not know or hear. So I encourage you all to take advantage. We're every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon. If you need a link, come find me or my co-pilot, Tyler Garney. Thank you all. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you on Monday.
All right. Thank you, folks.